Amen. Okay, we're going to continue with the halachas of Tefillin that we started. The last we left off was with the kavanah of Hanochas Tefillin, and we said the kavanah of Hanochas Tefillin is we have to keep in mind that it's Yichud Shmoi v'Yitzias Mitzrayim. That the idea of putting on Tefillin is to remember Avdus Hashem, the unity of Hashem, and the fact that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, so that we remember the miracles that Hashem did with us. And by remembering the miracles, this implies that if Hashem does miracles with us, obviously Hashem is in control of everything, of the limitations of the world, and even what seems to be something limited in the world. If Hashem decides, he can go beyond that and perform miracles. So everything in this world is controlled by Hashem, is permeated with godliness. So that's really what the concept of Tefillin is all about. We put it again opposite our hearts, opposite our mind, so to invest our emotions in that, or invest our seichel, our intellect in that. And that's really what, the uniform of a Jew is really all about, putting those things on and keeping those things in mind. Generally you talk about a soldier putting on a uniform, you don't have to tell him that if you put on this uniform, this is what you have to keep in mind, the allegiance to the American government. Put on the uniform so you protect yourself. But when we talk about Tefillin as a uniform for Bnei Yisrael, it's really a protection, sure, a protection for Bnei Yisrael, but at the same time, in order for it to be a protection in the fullest sense, there's a special intention that we have to have when we put on Tefillin. And those are important. It's important to have that in mind. Achiyuv shel mitzvahs Tefillin, the chiyuv of the obligation to put on Tefillin, chol al hagvarim, it's a mitzvah that applies particularly to males, Migil 13, from bar mitzvah and on, that's when it becomes a chiyuv, that's when there's an obligation to put on Tefillin. Abel noshim peturos mitzvahs Tefillin, but women are potter, are not obligated to put on Tefillin, kiven shehi mitzvahs aseh shazman geroma, because we know there's a rule that noshim are not obligated to do any mitzvah that has a time constraint, that is bound by a particular time, and Tefillin is bound by a time. Why is it bound by a time? Shaharei b'Shabbos v'Yantiv ein mitzvah la'aniach Tefillin. Shabbos and Yantiv, there's no mitzvah to put on Tefillin. So obviously there's a time constraint when you put on Tefillin, when you don't. And as a result of that, women are not obligated. Min hageinu, so the halacha is that who's obligated to put on Tefillin? A bar mitzvah boy, from the time that it becomes bar mitzvah. But min hageinu, our custom is lahaschil lahargil hanochas Tefillin es na'arim chachayim lefnei bar mitzvah. Our custom is that we train a child 2 months before he becomes bar mitzvah. You train him to put on Tefillin. Because if you don't train somebody to put on Tefillin, how do you expect him to be able to do it properly when he becomes bar mitzvah? All of a sudden he's bar mitzvah, he has a tremendous obligation with all the kavanas and everything that he has to keep in mind. And today he has to do all of the above. So if you don't train the child properly previously, so how could he possibly do it? And the truth is that that's really what the mitzvah of chinuch is all about. The mitzvah of chinuch on a father, on a parent, to train their children from different ages, whatever the age happens to be for chinuch, and for each particular mitzvah is a little bit different, but the mitzvah is all about so that in order for the child to be able to do the mitzvah when he has the obligation, if you don't train him, he's not going to know it. So that's part of the chiyuv, is to train the child appropriately, and for Tefillin, the time to begin training the child is from 2 months before the bar mitzvah. Why 2 months? Why not 10 months, 11 months, 15 months, or whatever? Because it's also associated with being, what's that? A gufnaki, because it's associated with being able to maintain a pure body and being able to maintain cleanliness and purity, and too young, you're not ready for that yet. So out of our mitzvah, the Torah tells you have to. So we start 2 months before, and as we see that the minhag is when you start 2 months before, you daven the entire shachris with the tefillin. Although, again, the chiyuv is to put on tefillin. So you might say, put on the tefillin, put them on and take them off and train them how to put on tefillin. But the minhag is to put them on and to daven the entire shachris. And after several weeks, once you've been trained and you have an idea of how it's supposed to be put on, then you start putting it on with a bracha. So the custom is that for the first month, you put it on without a bracha, and the second month, you put it on with a bracha. And as a result of that, I think it brings it down here somewhere. Sometimes there's a situation where a person is becoming bar mitzvah shortly after Yantif. Suppose somebody was becoming bar mitzvah today, just went through Yantif, and if he started putting on tefillin 2 months before his bar mitzvah day, so then he would really not have 2 months to put on tefillin, because he put on 2 months before, so there's a nice couple of weeks of Yamim Tovim that you don't put on tefillin. So you don't have the training of 2 months as you would normally have. So for somebody like that, the custom is also to figure out how many days you're missing and to start putting on tefillin that many days earlier than 2 months, so that in fact you have 2 months of putting on tefillin like you would normally. Somebody who's not well, or somebody who has stomach issues and he can't keep himself properly clean during the time of davening. If he's able, at least for a small period of time, to be careful about it. For example, if a person knows he can't control himself and wait a whole davening, which might take an hour, but he knows just to say Shema and to say Shemona Esrei, which will take him whatever amount of time, that he can do. So if that's the circumstance, then you do it for the time that you can, because it's important to be careful that when you do put on tefillin, it should be done with a guf naki, with a proper cleanliness that's necessary. Not in the middle of Birchas Kishma.
I'm saying some way you said your guys solely say Shema wants to daven.
No. So
davening wants to put it on for a short period of time to an esrei.
Well, no. So that under those circumstances, what he would do is he would say Shema. He would make a bracha, say the Shema, and then say Shemona Esrei. So he wouldn't be davening in the regular order. I mean, that's done sometimes. Al Pidin. What's that? Or else use his siddur and skip. Because practically speaking, the halacha is that, and this happens often when you go on Miftzah Tefillin, and the person says, I have a minute for you, finished. So technically, you can make a bracha, put on tefillin, and say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and you fulfill the mitzvah. Obviously, if you can, you say, Ta'ayir Shema. If you can, even more, daven with him. But as long as you made the bracha, and you said the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, you have fulfilled the mitzvah, and that's sufficient. And sometimes you tell people it'll take 1 minute, and no, it can't take 1 minute. You say the bracha and you say Shema. Wow, I can't believe this. That's all I have to do, and I can fulfill the mitzvah. But again, here we talk about where a person can't do it, not because he doesn't want to. It's because he can't practically do it because he's not well. But if a person, for whatever reason, doesn't have the time, so as long as he puts it on and says the Shema, even the first pasuk of Shema is fulfill the mitzvah.
Say Shema before davening, basically, that's in the time to say it. So that's sort of like you would say Shema.
Correct. Correct. Once upon a time, this used to be the minhag until that everyone spoke about it differently by a sikha, that people would put on tefillin before davening if they, let's say, had coffee before davening, so they first would put on tefillin. It used to be done that way, but then the minhag became not to do it. That everyone spoke about it at a sikha, that it's not necessary, because it says, the halacha says that if you say Shema without tefillin, it's meyed eid sheker. You're testifying falsely. In Shema, you say, you have to put on tefillin. And here you're saying Shema and you're not putting on tefillin. So it's as if you're testifying falsely. So if you're going to be saying Shema to fulfill the mitzvah, so you should have the tefillin on too. But the Rabbi pointed out in that sikha, when is that so? That if you say it and you're not wearing tefillin, you're testifying falsely if you're not going to be putting on tefillin later with the Shema. So then you're saying it and you're testifying falsely. But if the reality is now you're just saying it without tefillin to fulfill the mitzvah of Shema, and you're absolutely going to, shortly afterwards, you're going to daven and you're going to put on tefillin and you're going to say the Shema. So then that's not what the Gemara says, that you're testifying falsely. And that's why after the Rebbe spoke about it from that perspective, people stopped being so careful about actually putting on the tefillin before and saying the Shema with it. What's that? Well, it's not that it was done. It's not that it was done. Some people were mahadir in that way. It was, as a rule, it wasn't done. But some people wanted to be mahadir because this is what the Gemara says. But it doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch that this is what you need to do. So the Rebbe said that even those that are mahadir, it's not something that you need to be mahadir in. That's the way it is. It's not that a minhag was changed. This is an interesting halacha. Not everybody is familiar with this. Al pidin Torah, you can put on tefillin hein bayom v'hein balayla. You can put on tefillin day and night. You know, we're normally familiar with the concept that tefillin is put on during the day. At night, you don't put on tefillin. But the truth is, again, as we say, that tefillin min haTorah can be put on day and night. That's the halacha. Okay, I was waiting for that question, and I was going to say, hold on, because min haTorah al pidin, there is a halacha that al pidin you can put on tefillin at night also min haTorah. Doesn't say anywhere that you can't put on tefillin at night. Ella, what then is it? Why don't we put on tefillin at night? Ella, shechachamim asru laniach tefillin balayla. The chachamim said, let's not put on tefillin at night. It's not as if the Torah says you have to put on tefillin day and night. The Torah says you have to put on tefillin. So al pidin, you could put it on day or night. The chachamim come along and say you can put it on day or night. Put it on during the day, not at night. Why? Because generally at night people sleep. That's the time of sleeping. And the concern is if you're going to wear tefillin at night, you might fall asleep in it, which often happens that even, I mean, not often, but on occasion it happens, you see people are davening and all of a sudden their head is, and they're in the middle of wearing tefillin, which is what the Chachamim said. You have to be careful. You certainly can't wear it at night because that's a concern. But even during the day, if you're going to fall asleep in it, you shouldn't be wearing it. So the Choshu Shema Yobi Lishon Bahen, and the Chachamim were concerned if you're going to wear it at night, you may end up sleeping in it. And if you're going to be sleeping in it, you're not in control of your body, so that you're going to make sure to keep your body properly clean. Bein Yashon. But
he should be able to control himself too.
Well, but that's a fact. That's mu'ud. But this is not. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not as if if a person hits somebody in his sleep, he's responsible. But for this, Torah says you're not in control of your physical body at that point. And therefore they said if you're going to wear tefillin at night, you might fall asleep in it. And you won't be able to be careful that your body is kept properly keep clean. And therefore, even when you take a look at the calendar and you think, when can we start davening? Right? So there's actually two different zmanim. I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Yes, when's the earliest we can daven? So if you want to figure out when the earliest you can daven, so b'diavad there's a man who shachar at dawn you can daven. But it's not for putting on film. You can't put on film that early. You can start davening, and then in between Alisa Shachar and Netzach and Misha Yakir is B'diavad, but Netzachamo is really the proper time. So there's a time that comes later at which time the proper time for putting on film is, or the time for putting on film is most appropriate. So even after Alisa Shachar, so that you can recognize somebody, but the actual appropriate time is, the best time, the lachatchila time is Netzachamo, which is quite a bit of time in between. But again, sometimes a person has challenges because of his work or whatever it is. So you can't go as far back to Alois HaShachar, but you could go back to the time of Misha Yaakov.
How else today, 6:41,
Okay.
7:30. So does that mean with that feeling you should really not put it on?
If you can, you should wait till nights. Yeah, but we do rely often on Misha Yaakov. But the lachatchila the time is nights, yeah. I mean, practically speaking, for many halachas, the day begins at Netzachamo. That's the halacha. That when you want to, when's the day? The day begins at Netzachamo and finishes at Shkia Sachamo. From Netz to Shkia, sunrise to sunset. For certain things, we say, the Chachamim say, okay, you can, if need be, you can do it a bit earlier, such as Vitalis and film, Isha Yaakov. But Al Pidin, the halacha is that, and for example, Netzachama is when the day finishes, but at the same time, Shkia Sachama is when the day finishes. But just because the day finishes at Shkia Sachama, that doesn't mean as Matzah Shabbos at Shkia Sachama we can start doing Malacha. We have to wait quite a bit after that yet. So again, there's what the day is all about and what the night is all about. But at the same time, there are different halachas that apply differently. And there's a lachatchila, there's a b'diavad, depending on the circumstances as to when you want to apply what. And some people do daven, although they shouldn't. Certainly not lachatchila. They daven from Alois HaShachar even. They say we have no choice. There's no alternative or whatever. So b'diavad, they do Alois HaShachar, but it's not really the appropriate time. Yeah. Again, tefillin and davening is two different halachas. You don't have to. You don't have to. You don't have to put on film when you're saying Krishma, as we said earlier. You could be saying Krishma much earlier than you're davening. You can be davening at 10 o'clock, and you could be putting on film. You can be saying Shema at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever the timing is. And you're saying Shema without putting on film. So as we said earlier, the fact that you're going to be saying later Shema with film, it's not a problem of Meid Eva Sheker. Okay, so there is a problem there. So we don't, as a rule, we're not from those that rush to do it at the nets and all of that. So some people who do it that way, they may have a gain on one end, but not necessarily a gain on the other end. You can't, as they say, you can't win it all. So you're gaining one thing, but you're losing a little bit on the other end. And that's why not everybody is Mahadid. You would think if that was such a big thing, you would see that Rabbeim would have certainly have done it. They're Mahadid b'mitzvahs in the best possible way. But yet it's not done that way for different reasons, because there's a balance. Siyum Zman Hanachosan. When is the conclusion of the Zman Hanachosan of putting on film? When is that? When is the last time to put on film? So the halacha says that last time to put on film is Shkia Sachama. Shkia. But let me ask you a question. If you're going out on Mitzvah film, and Shkia is, let's say, 6 o'clock, and 5 after 6, you find the Jew, and he didn't put on film yet. So what do? Do you put on film with him, or do you say, no, it's past Shkia, can't put on film with him anymore? So the halacha is, as we said, you should put on film before Shkia, but if it's between Shkia and Netzachama, this is a very practical halacha. People should know this, that it's a practical halacha that although al pi din you should be putting on film before Shkia, but if you meet somebody that hasn't put on film and it's after Shkia, it's before Netzachama, you absolutely should be. Let me finish. You should absolutely put on film with him, but you should not make a bracha. Is that the question? What's that? Tzeisaki Chavi. Until Tzeisaki Chavi, correct. And that's an important child that many people don't think of necessarily. Okay, Shkia, gotta close up shop. But if you find somebody at that point that hasn't put on film, put on film. And the same thing for yourself. Sometimes somebody, and I've had this child, somebody called me, I didn't put on the Tom's film and it's after Shkia, what should I do? Take a look at the watch. If it's before Tzeisaki Chavim, put it on. No, you don't make a bracha. Yeah. Times you don't make a bracha anyway. Yeah.
All day long, like not after davening, I mean like for secular, not Kodesh.
So some people, as we'll soon learn, al pi din, you're allowed to wear tefillin all day, but you have to be especially careful, as we talked about, the kedusha and the tahara that you're involved in when you do it. And as a result of that, since we have to be especially careful, most people only wear it when they're davening. And even during davening, some people, when they're davening, don't say another word but daven, because they're wearing tefillin. Besides the fact that you should, besides the fact that in the middle of davening you shouldn't be speaking anyway, but especially if you're wearing tefillin, there's a special kedusha and tahara that you have to have. You have to have intention, and during that period of time, when you're wearing tefillin, you shouldn't be saying anything else. So that's why you wear tefillin. For the most part, people wear tefillin only during davening. Those that wear it a whole day, so either they're so holy and they feel comfortable enough that they are careful, or they're not so careful, but they wear it anyway. Right. Might have.